Welcome to the new units analysis, comparisons, and should you pull for November 2018 of Fire and Ice, which includes 2 heroes on a new banner. Yesterday we looked on our impressions video. Today we look at the units and how they relate to other units currently in the pool, summoning pool, and availability of Fire Emblem heroes. And of course, what sort of implications they may have on the meta, how you can properly use them, and of course, what sort of mathematics are on this specific banner. Now, let me point out that this is a first for Fire Emblem heroes, and we've never gone a 2-person banner, but it is a positive first. It means that if you desire these focus units, they're incredibly easy to get, and if you ever consider merging up a hero, maybe up to +10, both of these are very good options. And for fodder as well, like there's no precedent set by this. It is in fact better than a Hero Fest if you're targeting a specific hero, or on par, maybe on par. And of course, it's comparable to a legendary banner depending on what units share with what. So we're going to look at that during the end of the video, the mathematics, but first we'll look at the units themselves and do our usual comparison. The builds I show will be one, just kind of like if you have a 5-star version of the character, how you can use them in a very consistent way in all content of the game. So it can be applicable to most people, you know, arena assaults, ether raids, whatever you happen to use them in whatever way. And then we'll look at a more arena focused or meta version of them as well, and comparisons that I can make with that. So anyways, if you are on Twitch, I welcome you guys to say hi to YouTube, and the YouTube crowd, feel free to say hello to those on the Twitch because I'm sure they check out the video as well. Let's jump into what we have here. So Ylgr is a second blue dagger, but one that is in the permanent pool. As I predicted, she is incredibly fast, has an actual decent attack stat, which is kind of shocking to me, and relatively low bulk, but due to increased BST of not trainees, but Gen 2, she doesn't have like the worst of bulk. It's still going to be 58 to 60 is not bad at all. With the Bane, it does make it a little bit weaker, but it's not terrible. Her HP being so low is a positive for her. It makes it really easy to use specific skills, as I pointed out on the left. Now, I will not compare Yogur to any other character really in the game that's in the current summoning pool, because she's a blue dagger, so that puts her as not really comparable to anything else. Maybe a blue mage is the close comparison I can make, and that would be something like May, I say, or Tail 2. May, Tail 2, or Odin are probably the most comparable to Ylgr. Because they hit magical damage, and most units in the game tend to have low res but high defense. This is a common thing, but I won't look at those characters in particular because, well, they're more likely to be having better firepower than Ylgr with, or just be more consistent by targeting res. Not always the case. You do end up fighting like flyers and such that have low defense and high res in some content in the game, so it's something to consider. Now, if you want to use Ylgr, the build on the left is kind of like what I have in mind, which is your pretty standard Fury Desperation combo. And, you know, this may not shine of creativity, but it really does work, and even better for Ylgr due to how her stat spread and her preference weapon function. So her preference weapon gives her an additional 4 attack and 4 speed, and as long as she has more than 1 speed than her opponent, she has like her speed bumps up enough to guarantee a double. So the best skill in the game that synchronizes with this is going to be Desperation. It really comes down to that. She doesn't actually need a speed boon in my opinion, because her speed is already really good as it is, and if you have any sort of support on the team, whether that's a hone speed, drive speed, anything like that, you're already going to be outspeeding most units in the game anyways. It's unnecessary, so you might as well bump up the actual firepower that she has. You don't necessarily have to use Moonbow here either. Glimmer could be comparable in some certain situations depending on what she hits, but since, like I said, most units tend to have higher defense rather than res, I feel like Moonbow is probably likely to get more value than Glimmer would. Now, Flashing Blade, again, synergistic with how she functions. She wants to outspeed units, so Flashing Blade always has that synergy. Flashing Blade with Desperation means you attack twice and you have a guaranteed Moonbow proc for additional damage. It really does work, and I mean, you know, that's how you should use her, really. I mean, it's going to be the most consistent way. A quick mention of Sorcery Blade is that, yeah, she might be comparable to somebody like May Odin and like Tail 2 with that skill, but then she really gives up an A skill, which gives her a ton of stats and ends up being not as synergistic with a skill like Desperation. So I don't really value Sorcery Blade yet. It might be a sleeper skill, and maybe we'll review it later in the future should it become, like, I feel like if a unit could use like Close Counter and Sorcery Blade, that skill might be a lot better. But since that's not the case, I don't feel like the skill is that great by giving up a really important skill slot, which is the A slot. Okay. Second, here is Ylgr in final form, and honestly, usually I wouldn't even show like a +10 5-star exclusive, but as we'll see in the mathematics later, it's not even impossible as this to be a long-term goal, especially if you consider the current banner and maybe some copies later down the road through a permanent or legendary banner. So if you start working on it now, it's very realistic that you could probably +10 her, and she's not a terrible option for it either due to her stat spread being really high speed and such. So what we have on the left is, of course, HP 5 is a substitute for when blue dual infantry gets released, which is likely to happen because I don't feel like C dual infantry and G dual infantry and red dual flyer are the last we'll see of those skills. We're likely to see in the future. So if you end up using her in the arena meta, you give her that skill, bump her up, and range units are fantastic in arena from my experience. You know, if you soften up units with range units, you can really manipulate AI in a way that causes like rally loops, and AI tends to function to your advantage when you have a range unit on the team. When I use units like Soren or Merrick, it's really easy to win matchups due to just that having that range advantage. And that's what you have on the left side there. So Water Sweep Poison Strike, you've seen this build a couple of times. It works, it's good, and she has Speed Tactic in the C slot, so that works as well. A good alternative, of course, is that she has Chill Attack, but by running Chill Attack, you do risk killing things, and yeah, you don't really want to kill things either. You don't necessarily even have to use a plus attack IV. You could maybe use like a plus defense one, for instance, since if you use Water Sweep, then you might take some physical hits on a retaliation through distant counter. Generally speaking, a decent long-term project, especially if you don't have a blue range unit that you liked enough to use. Okay, next up, Surtur, big bad Surtur, ruler of flame. Okay, so Surtur is about as min-max as I guess we're ever gonna get. I don't know, man. Looking at his stats is like ridiculous. The dude has so much attack, defense, res, and HP that it's like the guy might as well have just been like a green Arden that's summonable. And the fact that he comes on a 2-person banner is also insane to me. So this guy has some incredible value just out of his stat spread. And dumping speed as a combat unit is going to be one of the best ways to use him should you not care about arena. Now, all things considered, though, he is a 5-star exclusive, and that means he's going to have comparable options if you don't intend to +10 him. So on our left, we'll be comparing him with Sheena. Now Sheena does have a couple advantages over using Surtur, and that's going to be the fact that Sheena can refine her weapon and have a better choice of weapons. Yes, Surtur can change his weapon, but then you're not really using him to his full potential with his kit, which is using his C slot, which synergizes with his weapon, which softens up units. Like I don't feel like you should change out Surtur's weapon. You could, but Sheena does have the option of changing a weapon, refining it, and giving herself 9 additional stats due to the 5 HP, 4 res, or 4 defense if you choose to go for something like that. Another thing to consider, of course, is Sheena actually has a speed stat, and due to the super boon, with merges of course, she has enough speed that you don't necessarily have to run something like Worry Fighter. Now, I've shown a base 5-star Sheena where she doesn't reach enough speed for that to be the case, which is why you would use something like Worry Fighter and then use bond skills to really capitalize on playing with, you know, a few set of armors or friends and such, and really bump up her bulk to comparable values to something like Surtur, which is kind of what you want to go here. Some other options you can consider as well could be like Hack-a-Lantern, Ardent Service. You know, the mind is kind of like, you can kind of do so many things with Sheena that looking at Surtur comparatively means you're kind of restricted to more things. For example, Sheena could run Special Fighter a lot better than Surtur can, even though Surtur's A skill, yes, does provide him with guard. Remember that Special Fighter is on both phases and it gives you additional cooldown charge. Should you use something like Vengeful Fighter on Surtur, you do risk getting doubled and killed, whereas Sheena, using Special Fighter could actually dodge some doubles, especially if you use a plus speed IV, for instance. So that's something to really compare and contrast between both. Of course, if you choose to go all the way with Sheena, which I'm sure actually many of you have, especially those that are interested in Arena, you'll see that she ends up having really good res due to a refinement, can use a weapon like Ardent Service, and still accomplish pretty good supportive functions. So you got your double ploys, you got Ardent Service, which comes off Groom Marth, you could use High Goida as well with NY Azura, and you could use, I believe, Lilith Floaty, which are the more expensive options, but again, having that flexibility in weapon does matter here. Plus speed IV is chosen again because well, you need to use it to bump her up to her higher scoring bin. Another thing to consider as well is, of course, that Worry Fighter does have some value even with a plus speed boon or units that are speedy enough because of the nature of skills like Bold Fighter and Vengeful Fighter. Bold Fighter, for instance, versus Worry Fighter becomes a speed check. So if Sheena ends up fighting somebody that Bold Fighters her and she can just stall out a speed check, meaning like if an enemy has, let's say, 35 speed and you're running Worry Fighter, but that 35 speed unit had Bold Fighter, it just ends up being a stalemate. Whereas in this situation of Surtur, well, with Worry Fighter and against a Bold Fighter, his speed is so bad that you're very likely to get doubled through Bold Fighter. So yeah, there's still some pros and cons to both units here, and I think Sheena is definitely good enough if you already have her. Now, I'm not going to completely ignore Surtur himself, and he does have some definite niche, definite utility, so I'm going to take time to look at him himself. As you can see, he's pretty much base kit on the left because it really does work out of the box. You don't really need to do much with Surtur's kit to make him work, okay? You pretty much, you know, he takes a bit of damage and you can really bump up his stats even further using something like Brazen Attack Res. Keep in mind he has a plus attack super boon and a plus defense super boon with super banes and HP and speed, which is unfortunate because optimizing him would have included something like plus attack minus speed or plus defense minus speed. Unfortunately, you're going to have to opt for things like plus attack minus defense or res, or plus defense minus res to really capitalize on his 180 BST should you want to use him in an arena core, which I highly recommend because he's really going to bump you up in the scoring, which results in more rewards. So yeah, you don't really have to do much with him. He's already really supportive out of the box. He does 20 damage non-lethal through his weapon for anyone that's nearby, and his Surtur's Menace, you know, of course, debuffs units nearby and buffs himself, so it's pretty crazy how that works. Brazen Attack Res, if you do use him in the arena, for instance, should just be swapped out for maybe a drive if you want to use him that way. But of course, if he's a bonus unit, I think Brazen Attack Res does have a lot of value. So not really much that you really have to change, but you could honestly play around with Vengeful Fighter if you think he can survive lots of hits. You could use him with Bold Fighter as well, since he's got low speed and you can auto double that way. Yeah, he's a really good unit. You don't have to do much. He's really good as he is. One thing I want to consider and I want to mention this as well, this is a unit on the enemy AI where you don't really want, like, the enemy not using Armor March. He's more threatening when he doesn't have Armor March. And the reason for this is because as long as he moves one space, you can't bait him from 2 spaces away, and you can't bait him from 3 spaces away because he moves 2 and engages you. You actually need to bait him from 2 spaces away, which means that his C skill and his weapon do hit you. And that means if you leave him for last, that's a big mistake. He's the type of unit you need to deal with first, or you're gonna suffer through his weapon or C skill and hitting you, and it's hard to deal with him that way. Definitely recommend fighting against him that you kill him first, especially if there's Armor March on the team. And you're gonna need something like red TAs or weapon effective like armor slaying weapons and such to beat him. He's kind of annoying, but I wouldn't call him like game breaking or anything by any means. He's another green armor and a saturated pool of green armor. It's like you wouldn't want to bait a LA Hector with Ignis running Bold Fighter, right? It's the same idea. You're going to want to attack into him and slay him that way. Most red units could even afford to take the 20 damage and stat difference that they take in that case because it's not really going to matter. So that's my tip of playing against him. I don't think he's going to really break the meta in any way that any other green armor hasn't already done. Okay. And finally, if you truly want to crush your foes and smite them away, I highly recommend this incredibly fire-based build that only the true top percentage of game players in this Fire Emblem Heroes can do, okay? If you are a top ranking player, top 5, I highly recommend taking advantage of the seal only exclusive to you. It's called Moose Spell Flame. This build can only be played by the top 50 of Ether raids right now in Fire Emblem Heroes. That includes me, baby. Sucks to be you. Kappa 123. So, you know, here is Surtr, king of memes. Let's move on. Alright. So this kind of is a surprise to some people. We got another villain as a GHB. It has no real relevance to the units released, I guess, except maybe Surtur in some way or another. It's really interesting if we're gonna get a Forging Bonds as a result of these characters. I don't know how I feel about that, but GarnF is Marth's antagonist, so I guess we weren't gonna get a Shadow Dragon banner anytime soon, or Mystery of the Emblem to really capitalize on GarnF, and they just said whatever, let's release him. I'm not too impressed by GarnF. I think he's interesting, but he's not really anything revolutionary by any means. Like, you're not gonna really spend grails for him, for instance. I think that he provides chill attack is pretty cool, and you can probably use his base kit in a way that's similar to using somebody like Garon with his breath blight skill as weapon, and like Scatty on Takumi, for instance, Fallen Takumi. But I think Scatty's probably gonna be a bit better than his. I can't really say without practice, but generally speaking, the way you want to use GarnF is to place him in the middle of a bunch of foes, hope that he survives, and then on the perfect turn, you end up just hitting everything for a bit of damage, non-lethal of course, and then they can't counterattack. So that's pretty cool as a supportive function, I might say, but I don't feel it being too consistent, because you don't really want to place a mage in the middle of enemies and think that he's going to survive. Like, it doesn't really always work unless you do some crazy fort defense res gimmick, tons of merges, maybe super buff him or something like. But then it's not consistent. That's kind of the idea I'm going for here. But either way, if you want to make him that sort of ideal unit, then you would give him Savage Blow, Poison Strikes, that sort of idea, and just make him supportive that way. Growing Wind, all this non-lethal damage is kind of how I envision him being really useful. Unfortunately for GarnF, we already have like a really good red infantry support mage, so and he's really available through the GHBs, so I don't really recommend really investing in GarnF due to Arvis just being a very comparable and good unit in his own right. So double debuffs or quad debuffs through Vol Flame and using the appropriate seal gives you your quad ploys. Now he can be merged up to +10 as well, which puts his res at a respectable 40 with Fury. So yeah, like Arvis can deploy pretty much everything in the game. Now additionally on top of that, Arvis acts as a really good substitute healer due to recovering 10 HP every turn through Recovering, and Ardent Sacrifice does that as well. So there's been a lot of fire in this comparison, and I really want to thank you guys for watching that. But okay, let's actually jump into the mathematics portion of the stream, or video rather. So as you guys can see, we got ourselves what is, in my opinion, the most revolutionary type of banner we've ever had, which is a 2-person focus banner. And this deserves its own section of math, because those of you that are familiar with how the focus banners work in Fire Emblem Heroes, essentially the more focus units there are, the harder it is to pull a specific focus unit should you try to go for them. But the less there are, the easier it is to get them. And that's why Surtur and Ylgr here are going to be some of the easiest heroes we'll ever get if you're trying to spend a couple of orbs for them. In fact, it is so easy to get them that literally 1 in 20 people, or maybe 1 in 19 or so, end up getting a free Surtur. It gets really way more common than something like a 4-person focus banner. Like Halloween Myrrh, for instance, would have been like almost 1 in 40 people or so. You know, it's like almost half the amount difference there. Yogur also comparatively being really easy. Green Pool being really non-saturated ends up being that Surtur is just really easy to get a copy of, and since he comes with Steady Stance 4, which is a decent skill, might I add you, especially on units like horses and flyers who couldn't otherwise use breast before, really tanky ones, and special mention to things like Baruka or or Seth or Stall. But yeah, there's a lot of those really tanky units that will appreciate something like that for sure on enemy phase, and I think Surtur is going to become really easy for most people to pull. Yogur again has chill speed, so and Sorcery Blade should you want to hold on to that sort of copy. Speed Tactic being in the permanent pool. Like, these are really good in terms of fodder options, and even having a single copy should you consider it. Even those of you that feel really unlucky, if you look at 90th percentile, that means 1 in 10 people spend about 166 orbs to get a single copy of Surtur. Now, you're probably saying like, man, I don't want to be one of those 10 people that spend so much, but realistically speaking, that's like the average to get a Halloween Myrrh from the most recent banner. So 1 in 10 people getting 166 orbs for a copy is just almost the same as getting a 5-star focus here, and they're both 180 BST units with the right IVs. So that's insane. What I want to also look at though is more or less at the percentiles that we have here, and hopefully you guys can see this, but what I'm looking at here is the lowest percentile of people, basically the luckiest to the most unlucky. So if you look at the top of the chart there, that is basically the most unlucky people in the world. Those that would spend so many orbs to get a single copy. For instance, I mentioned it earlier, like 166 orbs being about the most you spend for like Surtur, 1 in 10, but most people will land about like 60 to 100 orbs for a single copy of these units. Additionally, and it's more important to look at this, the plus 10 versions of these units, which is a completely new thing because this banner is 2-person. So almost 50% of people who end up summoning here would spend about 800 or so orbs. Every like second person could spend about 800 orbs to get a plus 10 Surtur, which is amazing because if you compare it to something like the legendary banner where you need to spend like 1800 orbs for like a plus 10, maybe from like 1300 all the way up to 2000, that kind of range being there. You know, it's insane that you can plus 10 a 5-star exclusive with that little amount of orbs and having such a huge impact, should you care about the arena at all, with 180 BST being a thing. Now, there could be a chance you don't even get the right IVs, and that's really crushing, but with 11 copies, hopefully that's not the case. I don't know the mathematics on that one specifically, but yeah, hopefully you get the right IV there. Even if you didn't, it's not like you'd have to spend too many orbs for more copies, and at least the fodder would be good. Finally, as a kind of like note here, I don't even, honestly, like, should you pull, and I'm kind of like gonna say this, which is may surprise some people. If you care about arena, this banner is definitely worth pulling for Surtur specifically, not Ylgr. Yogur not so much, but Surtur specifically. If you care about the arena, plus 10ing Surtur or getting as many copies as you can does have a genuine impact on your scoring here, okay? So if you can get like a plus 6 Surtur and you get the 180 BST, he's going to outscore so many units anyways, and you could easily finish him off, whether that's through another focus banner, which he probably won't be on a 2-person when he does come back, or legendary banner should he decide to share with something different, like different utility, maybe a good legendary hero like legendary Hector or brave Ephraim for something. That would be the golden scenario that he shares with something like legendary Hector and brave Ephraim, but I don't think that'll happen. I honestly haven't seen something of that quality since Hardened Fjorm and Winter Robin, and maybe they don't want to repeat that and kind of space out the stuff. That's why I feel like Emblem didn't show up for a really long time, because they want to space out the quality of these colors and legendary banners a bit better. Brave Ike, Myrrh, and legendary Hector does get a mention as well for being really decent for that sort of scoring situation, but honestly, I don't see it happening again. So by the end of the banner, if you care about arena, rewards, rankings, and such, committing to Surtur is definitely a good idea. And I'm personally going to do it as well on my FTOP account if, and this is very important, if they do not announce any sort of arena changes. If arena stays as it is, then that means that Surtur is a good investment. But if they do create some sort of arena changes, whether that's through BST, bonus kills, I mean, even with bonus kill system changing, he'd still be a good value. But if they don't announce anything and arena stays as it is, then Surtur is going to be a good investment. So therefore, if you're going to commit to Surtur, wait until the final day, or at least like the last few days, where we get some news as to what's going to come out. Don't pull on day one. There's no reason, no rush to, even if it has an impact right now, because your orbs may get wasted for things that may come, in 3.0 happening. So yeah, maybe look forward to me summoning for this guy for plus 10 on the final day. That you could look forward to, only if I feel like his value isn't lost. And I will obviously keep up with this information on my stream, so make sure you check out the Twitch stream. Maybe ask me there if you're still uncertain, or the Discord as well. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, thanks. Give it a thumbs up. Always does help. And subscribe if you haven't for more of this sort of content. Love you guys, and leave your comment below for who you actually want, if you do want them, or what reason you would use them for. All right, see you guys in the next one. Peace.